Welcome to the midweek edition of iNN's Headlines and Beyond. It's for week 9. The weekend edition that was supposed to be up a couple of days ago, well, it didn't happen because we were without internet over the weekend. We've been upgrading our systems, and sometimes when that happens, we're without internet for a couple of days, and that's what happened. So we had to drop one of the editions in order to get the internet work done. That being said, it's back to the usual grind, and we are going to start looking into more of the complexities of geopolitics here. And as I said, this is not simply a if you will, a feed up a neutral position news broadcast. We're not simply throwing stuff out at you. There is some reading to do. There is some studying to do. Do as much as you want. Do as little as you want. It's self-paced, but it is in the educational value here is actually in many cases simply is just in watching this, because as you get used to these discussions that go on, as you get used to hearing them, you begin to pick up things even though you may not intend to do so. So it is a benefit simply from watching and listening to what's going on, even if you don't intend to participate or sort of get involved in the arguments or some of the discussion that's going on here. And so back to this, what we're talking about here. We're talking about we're going to continue on in our whole series here. This isn't simply a one-off show. These shows are connected in a series. So you can go back to the beginning show, back to the first show, and see sort of a connection between the different broadcasts, the different editions. One thing we're looking at now is we're looking at the American Empire, and it's titled Freedom for a Few. Because what's happened is that the United States more and more is becoming now a very elitist state where people at the top have a lot and people at the bottom have nothing. Before the United States was set up in a manner that anyone could do, start from the bottom and work their way up to the top. That's becoming increasingly difficult as the models of socialism start coming in. Both the left and the right have their views on what society should look like and how society should be structured. And these policies, as they're enacted, tend to lock people into fixed economic positions. People will argue that this is racially based, but if you look at it more carefully, you'll find it has nothing to do with race. It actually has to do with economics. It's about an economic status and where you are economically in the ladder. And some of these higher up people, some of the people who are wealthy, have a significant degree of power, and they want to preserve this power. They want to preserve their environment. And they don't want people who are not like them to be in association with them. In other words, they don't want them in their neighborhoods. They don't want them in their clubs, so on and so forth. And of course, when you talk about the wealthy, the elite, the powerful, you don't often get into the whole discussion of the Illuminati and the whole discussion of the New World Order. I don't particularly like these terms. But the reality is they are out there, and people are using them. They're used a lot. A lot of people believe in the Illuminati and the NWO. What I'm going to do is show you that the NWO and the Illuminati are not one thing, that there are a variety of different things. And in many cases, there are a variety of New World Orders that are competing with each other. There's a variety of Illuminati groups that are competing with each other. In other words, these terms, Illuminati and NWO, don't represent one monolithic thing, but rather become umbrella terms for a variety of different things, a variety of different geopolitical events that are going on. And so you'll find, if you want to really understand the Illuminati and the NWO, this whole concept of these things and false flags, you really do need to get down to reading George Orwell. I recommend 1984, but I also recommend all his works, all of George Orwell works, sort of really help you build a picture of what's going on today, because you see a lot of what's going on today, the false flags and everything, in 1984. You'll find it in George Orwell's work. Animal Farm, which is based on the evolution of communism. That's in his book, it's written very well and understand. If you understand that Animal Farm is based on communism, that this is his sort of his essay on communism, then you come away from the book with a whole different view. And if you really want to sort of get into some more of the details on sort of this whole thing about, if you're aware of Mockingbird and Mockingjay and the whole Hunger Games series, this produced a whole series of books called dystopian novels. These are looked at the societies that are called dystopian societies. These are societies that look like they're pretty good, that they're supposed to be very clean and so on and so forth, but there's an underlying nastiness to the society. We would call these, before the dystopian series came out, these would be post-apocalyptic worlds. But if you look at George Orwell, you'll find a lot of this dystopian stuff in there. In other words, George Orwell, in his books, 1984 and Animal Farm, are the progenitors to this whole dystopian series that is now very popular with a lot of young people. And of course, you can go further back in time. So George Orwell was basically in the 1950s, from the 1930s to the 1950s. That's his sort of time frame. But you can go further back to the 1600s and into the 1800s. With 1600s, you go back to Niccolo Machiavelli, that's the Prince. And if you look at the Russian author Fyodor Dostoevsky, you're going back to the 1800s. So you do have a good amount of history in these authors here. And that's why I say, yes, read the books, but they'll say at the same time, study the authors, find out who they are, and that's why the recommended studies are George Orwell and Fyodor Dostoevsky, because you're getting a good history on the evolution of Western power. And you'll see that you'll see the false flags in there. You'll see a lot of this whole concept of Illuminati in there, the concept of New World Order, and you understand that the New World Order, the Illuminati, are not new things. That they're there in history, that they've had a significant amount of failure. They're not as omnipotent as they appear to be. So. There's a way of sort of decoding these things, and this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be looking at that. And I said, one of the things that we are going to be doing that to make this a better environment for everybody to really sort of not just simply be an elitist organization where all I'm doing is sort of talking to, the high hands, the people who are, culturally aware and have an academic or a sense of intellectualism. This is for everybody. This is for anyone who has an interest in this. This is for anyone who wants to learn, who wants to improve themselves. This is why I'm offering this out now to the sex professionals of Canada. I'm opening up to this group here in Canada here, inviting them. This is why their tags are here, where I have them tagged in the notes and the liners. I have them tagged because this is an open invitation to them. If you want to learn, if you want to improve yourself, here you go. It's free of charge. Sit down and watch, and I will be bringing more and more content, more and more opportunities to learn, so that you can, instead of having to be a prostitute, if you want a better life, then I'm going to provide that. I'm going to provide an avenue to do so. And this is what I'm sort of saying. I'm stepping forward. It's not simply just about journalism. It's not about having a sort of a journalistic esteem or something like that. This is, in many cases, the way I view journalism. Journalism is basically observational psychology. This is how you assess the psychology of society. And this is what we're doing here. We're looking at the psychology of society. And understanding that, we can go into this whole concept of the NWO, the Illuminati, and ask yourself, well, what are you talking about? There was more than one NWO. Well, New World Order. Well, there's the Nazi New World Order. The Nazis believed that they were going to conquer everything, and they're part of the Illuminati. The SS were an Illuminati-type group. They were interconnected with the Illuminati, because the Illuminati go all the way back to the Crusades, right? They have a whole history there, going all the way back to the Crusades. The Nazi NWO, which sprang from the SS, believed that it was going to succeed. And, of course, 1945, it died. It went up in flames. And we all know what happened to Hitler, in terms of we saw what's on the news. So no matter what happened to Hitler in terms of living or dying, the whole concept of the Fourth Reich or whatever it was, succeeding, becoming the New World Order, didn't actually happen. And of course you had Stalin, who believed that the Soviets would become the next world order, that this is the way the world would be, that you would have a Soviet New World Order. That ended in 1990. And so what happens now? Where are we now? Well, we have basically 4 or 5 main categories. See, there was actually 6 categories here. There's the neo-Nazi movement is coming back again. That's another New World Order. There's the neo-communist is the second. Because you have the socialists. They're called the socialists now, but the thing is, I don't need to understand that Nazis are socialists themselves. Nazis are socialists on the right. They're national socialists. And the neo-communists are on the left. The socialists on the left. So let's start using the proper terms here. The commonly called socialists or communists, they are socialists on the left, and the Nazis are the socialists on the right. They're the nationalist social. They believe in nationalism. Then there is the neo-tribal. The neo-tribal goes back to the tribal society. They're usually earth worshippers. A lot of the environmental movement is neo-tribal. You have the Islamic New World Order. They believe that they're going to create something. Then you have a Judaic New World Order, and there's a variety of different Judaic New World Orders there. And then, of course, you have the capitalist New World Order, okay? And they believe that they going to have their own world order as well. And so all these different New World Orders, these groups that surround these things, and there's a variety of different groups within each category. They're all battling for each other for control. No one is sort of saying it's not one New World Order. There's a variety of different views on exactly what the New World Order is going to be. So you ask, well, okay, let's see what type of Illuminati do you have? Well, you have Masonic. You have the Judaic Illuminati organization. You have those are the Kabbalists. Then you have another Judaic organization known as the Zionists. Then there are Judaic organizations that form for the secularists. They don't believe in anything. They're atheists. In the Catholic orders, you have the Jesuits. And of course, you have, on the political side, you have the Bilderberg, and the Nazis are still around. The Nazis, the SS, is still around. And it's that the Illuminati group that was behind the SS still exists today, and they were heavily interconnected with the Illuminati. And again, the Illuminati was simply groups, various different groups of Teutonic knights. These are the different knights that were involved in the Crusades, and there were a lot of them. There's no point in naming them all because there were so many. You're just talking about things going down on history. And what you begin to realize is that all these groups were in many ways historically connected. That these are in many ways outgrowths of the Crusades. So we're still living within the historical context of the Crusades and the growth of the European Empire. And so we're kind of an offshoot of this. We're within that sort of era, if you will, and we really haven't left it. And so what we can point out today, we talked about Obama's Cuba, and now we're going to talk about Obama's Iraq War, because now Obama is recommitted to the Iraq War again. So we now have Iraq War 2.0, and the ironic thing here was that while he's just doing what the Republican-controlled Congress wants. Well, if that were true, then why did he veto the pipeline, the oil sand pipeline? It's the Keystone Pipeline. He just recently vetoed it. That was in the news. He vetoed the Keystone Pipeline. Well, why did he veto that and okay the war? And if you look at it, you find that that in terms of warmongering, Obama has participated in more global destabilization than George W. Bush has. And that's sort of an astonishing thing, is if you sit down and actually look at it, you don't simply give Obama a pass. And realize that he's been involved in more conflict, more global turmoil in terms of overthrowing regimes than George W. Bush has. Then you got to sort of rethink and say, hey, wait a minute here. Something is not right. Anyways, when we come back, the political habitual liars.
iNN, uncut, unedited, and real. We deal with issues that other networks won't.
Hi, my name is Dr. Danny Karras. I'm your host for Headlines and Beyond on iNN. If you like the show we're saying, I do not monetize my channel because there's a lot of copyright issues with this. It creates a lot of problems. So how do I make my money? Well, if you like this show, it's very simple. We do it the PBS format. I ask you for a donation, but I'm not going to ask you for a lot. Or, well, all you have to do is, if you have $1 or $2 in your pocket, take it out, put it in an envelope. I'll give you the address. It will be in the description of my channel. Go to the channel description, go to About, and you'll see the address to send the $1 or $2 that you send. All I'm asking for $1 or $2. If you got $1 or $2 in your pocket, stick it in an envelope. Send it to iNN. That's iNN. The address is 87 Telson Road. It's 87 Telson, Telson Road. That's in Markham, Ontario. Postal code is L3R184. And I thank you for your support. Alrighty.
iNN, provoke, inform, and change. We deal with issues that other networks won't.
A habitual liar is someone whose first instinct when faced with a question or a situation is to lie. It is plain to see that with politicians, that many politicians can be classified as habitual liars. That when an issue arises, their first instinct, their first reaction is to lie, and then come back and restate what they said, clarifying what they really meant. Right? To clarify a statement. And in other words, the statement wasn't necessarily misunderstood. They were lying. But they didn't want to come out and say that they were lying, so once again they start lying again, and well, we weren't really lying, we were just misunderstood, and so let me clarify something here. And well, and the thing is that what we can see here is and the thing is, well, am I picking on Obama because he's a Democrat? Well, no, because, and this is where the Republicans also have a lot to answer for. That you have the Republican Senate just going bonkers. Senator John McCain now is out there pushing for wars all over the place. So as Obama's out there also pushing for regime change, so is Senator John McCain. So, and he's supposed to be the moderate. He's supposed to be, the maverick who walks the fine line, is able to deal with both sides. He's the guy who, if you want to go to, if you want to get a bipartisan bill passed, Senator John McCain was the guy you were supposed to go to. Well, now he's become a warmonger, and he's out there pushing war. He's the one who created ISIS. It was his work under Obama who created ISIS. And you can see him on there on CNN with John Anderson, saying how we had to arm the Free Syrian rebels, that they needed arms and weapons and so on, so forth. And they were having these, Senate hearings and conferences, and so on and so forth. They had these, all before ISIS emerged. And then all of a sudden ISIS emerges with all this American weaponry. And people go, oh, where did ISIS come from? Look at all the weaponry. Where did they get their weapons from? Well, didn't you realize that the United States was funding these people all this time? And then what happens, you begin to see that the politicians are in many ways habitual liars, because they'll come out and say one thing, and what's really going on is something completely different. And of course now, this has been sort of brought out in the media that with the fall of Brian Williams on MSNBC, that the anchors in the media is following suit, that they're basically lying to the public. So I mean, if you want to pay for MSNBC, you want to watch the news and say, "Oh yeah, I trust Brian Williams," or you think you're not being lied to in the news. Well, I'm sorry. It doesn't matter what level of news you buy, including the New York Times. It doesn't matter how high you think you are up. If you're watching the regular news, you're being lied to. If you're even watching the broadcast designed for the uppity ups, you're being lied to. So, anyways, the large thing of the stuff that's going on this week still has to do with NATO in Ukraine, the whole Ukrainian crisis. Things are getting worse and worse and worse there in terms of the relationship with Russia and things. But the thing is that, you hear the rhetoric saying that Russia has to back off from the Ukrainian borders. Well, wait a minute here. Who's encroaching into Russian territory? NATO or Russia? Russia's always been Ukraine has already been in Russia's background. Go look at the history and the biography of Fyodor Dostoevsky. Fyodor Dostoevsky does not start in Moscow. He starts in Kiev, because Kiev was Russia. People don't understand that Kiev was once part of Russia. And so they don't understand that it's NATO that's encroaching on Russia, not Russia encroaching on NATO. But of course, this narrative never comes up in the news. It's not in the mainstream media, but it hasn't been lost on people like Ron Paul. It hasn't been lost on people like Henry Kissinger. He understands what's going on. He knows that we're now in a situation of playing brinksmanship, that we're actually posed and now back in the situation we were during the Cold War, when we have no safeguards against nuclear war now. Although the United States and NATO is actively pushing for nuclear war. They're doing this so-called brinksmanship. Before we had brinksmanship with the Soviet Union in the 80s. But during the 80s, under Reagan, there was a direct contact between the Kremlin and Reagan. They had direct contact with each other. There was something known as the Red Line, where Reagan could pick up the phone and talk directly to the leader of Russia. And the Russian leader could do the exact same thing. So if there was a crisis where there was a risk they would have to, might have to launch a nuclear war, the leaders themselves could negotiate and come to a resolution before they actually had to push the button. That system, that safeguard, is now gone. So Obama is playing this nuclear war game, this nuclear war brinksmanship, without any safeguards. And so this was brought up in a security conference in Munich. That basically Obama is playing brinksmanship without any safety net, and that right now we are in a more serious situation, a nuclear situation, than we were in the Cold War. In other words, the Cold War, there were safeguards, there were issues, but there were also a lot of safeguards. There was a lot of communication and contact between the two different powers. Now there isn't. We're back before there are any safeguards, nuclear safeguards. But we have more powerful weapons today, and the nuclear heads are more powerful than they've ever been. All right, and of course, it's been revealed, through different leaks and WikiLeaks and so on and so forth, that Washington was heavily involved in Ukraine long before the protests began. It was also shown that the American had a huge hand in the coup that toppled the Ukrainian government, that brought in the new sort of this current president that is attacking his own people. And of course, what's happened is that the United States, every time there's been a truce between the so-called rebels in Ukraine and the Ukrainian government, the United States has taken every chance, every truce, as an opportunity to rearm the Ukrainian army to push further into the conflict. And I think this is something that sort of pops up again and again and again. And as we do this, we sort of see here that we go back to Kosovo, go back to the breakup of Yugoslavia, and you see the exact same thing going on, right? This is it. This has not been lost on a lot of different leaders. One of the leaders in France, right, pops up and says, "Hey, what's going on here? This is brinksmanship. They're trying to create a war in Europe, right?" They point out all the money that has gone into Ukraine from the U.S. Embassy. The fact that you have a lot of these political leaders showing up, including Senator John McCain, and all of a sudden then afterwards, the groups have been rearmed. All the different groups supporting the Ukrainian government have been rearmed, and you have a new war in it. So how is this war actually going? Well, the help that has been offered to Ukraine by the IMF, which is also connected to the World Bank, they've come up with a standard IMF loan format. They have to increase their cost of gas to the consumer by 280% and 66% for heating. In other words, they're going to start soaking the Ukrainian people for everything they're worth. Right? France and Germany are now really hurting, and so they're out there really talking to Russia. They've been having this deal going on since Christmas, trying to resolve the problem. But what happens? The United States turns around, and where do we see here in the news? The president of Ukraine, right? The Ukrainian president has struck a deal on arms supplies from the United Arab Emirates, right? This is at the same time the withdrawal of heavy troops by Kiev and the rebels appeared to be the top agenda of the so-called Normandy Quartet meeting. This is, France, Germany, and Russia, all talking about a ceasefire here. But the thing is that you have the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, now undermining this with the Ukrainian president, and what we end up having is the Ukrainian army being rearmed. So is this going to be successful or not? Well, we can sort of see this here, what's been going on. There's a timeline between January and now that shows that the Ukrainian troops are completely demoralized. They understand they're attacking their own people. They understand they're attacking their own civilians. They understand that they are part Russian, so that this is indeed a civil war. But the thing is that when they don't want to serve anymore, when they don't want to, keep fighting, they want to retreat. The Ukrainian military, the heads of the Ukrainian military, set up these paramilitary organizations so that as the troops begin to retreat, the paramilitary troops start firing on the Ukrainian troops themselves. So they're being fired on not only by the rebels, the Ukrainian troops, but they're being fired on by their own government. The admission of this has come from, ironically, the Ukrainian side of things, the Ukrainian security services, who estimates that there's 1,500 Ukrainian servicemen missing in action. Right? This is what's been going on. 1,500 soldiers, Ukrainian soldiers, are now missing. Right? From this report, the same report, they say in the prisoner exchange, they just recently had a prisoner exchange, right? They gave back 52 rebel soldiers, and they got 139 Ukrainian soldiers back. What was the morale amongst the Ukrainian soldiers? Horrible, right? Very bad, very upset. I'm going to guarantee you there's a lot of PTSD, the post-traumatic syndrome. That's going to be there. That's going to be a factor in the next society, the Ukrainian society coming up. It's going to play a huge part in what's actually going on. And the thing is, this if you look at some of the footage that was coming out of there, all these different the the different battles that were going on. There was one footage from a Ukrainian news service that were in there, and they were filming some of the attacks going on, and they had these masked Ukrainian gunmen that were going on, that were in military uniform. They were there to monitor and to sort of direct, and they looked like commanders because they were in charge. They looked like they were in charge of things, but they didn't speak Russian. They spoke perfect English. You know, when they see something like this, that these are now military operatives. These are CIA Special Forces military operatives. That these are Americans. You now have an American hand in there, actively guiding and pushing the war inside Ukraine. None of this ever shows up in American news or Western news. You have to go around, you have to go into these tiny little magazines to find this stuff here. And you always say, oh, this magazine is wrong. There's no way that's the case. So I went to the news service that they said you could see the video from. I watched the video, and very clearly in the video, when they began panning towards some of the soldiers who were in the masks, one of the soldiers, in a perfect American English, said, "Get the camera out of my face." There was no accent. There was no perfect English. "Get the camera out of my face." This means this was an American soldier. This was an American operative, and that now you have direct American involvement in the Ukrainian civil war, pushing, creating chaos for the civilians. And this area was primarily civilian. There was a lot of civilian casualties. You understand now the United States has become the evil empire. The United States has now started fueling, this is under Obama, fueling more wars than George W. Bush did. He's worse than the Republicans. And that's saying a lot because, you know, you want to argue that George W. Bush was an idiot, then, well, yeah, you can do that. But anyways, when we come back, we're going to continue on this line and we'll show you how the evil evolves from this whole situation and how these politicians are indeed habitual liars. And that they're out there creating war, creating misery for the standard people, for the standard person, for the average citizen, and they don't care because they're benefiting from it. On the other side.
iNN, uncut, unedited, and real. We deal with issues that other networks won't.
Hi, my name is Dr. Daniel Karras. I'm your host for Headlines and Beyond on iNN. If you like the show we're seeing, I do not monetize my channel because there's a lot of copyright issues with this. It creates a lot of problems. So how do I make my money? Well, if you like this show, it's very simple. We do it the PBS format. I ask you for a donation, but I'm not going to ask you for a lot. Or, well, all you have to do is, if you have $1 or $2 in your pocket, take it out, put it in an envelope. I'll give you the address. It will be in the description of my channel. Go to the channel description, go to About, and you'll see the address to send the $1 or $2 that you send. All I'm asking for $1 or $2. If you got $1 or $2 in your pocket, stick it in an envelope. Send it to iNN. That's iNN. The address is 87 Telson Road. It's 87 Telson, Telson Road. That's in Markham, Ontario. Postal code is L3R184. And I thank you for your support. Alrighty.
iNN, provoke, inform, and change. We deal with issues that other networks won't.
As I was saying before the break, it was recently, actually just a couple days ago, revealed in a small news outlet that another news outlet had actually filmed a masked soldier in Ukraine fighting on the Ukrainian side. He seemed to be, from the video that I watched, a commander, a person in charge. And then when the camera was pointed towards him, he clearly, in English, in no accent whatsoever, said, "Get the fucking camera out of my face." The understanding from what I saw, from what I heard, means to me that this was an American operative. That this was American intelligence. That this was American special forces. That the United States is fully engaged, fully involved in the Ukrainian war, in pushing things forward. It also shows, because they didn't have a French accent, they didn't have a German accent, they didn't have an English accent, that France and Germany are really seriously, they're serious about the peace process. But it shows the United States is not serious about the peace process. That they're using every opportunity they can to create chaos within the Ukraine. And this is bad for the Ukrainian people, it's bad for Europe. And in other words, Europe is going to suffer because of what the United States is going to do. This is not a good United States. This is not what the flag is supposed to be about. And said, this is evil. And the thing is, you can now begin to start seeing some of the lies coming through. In an article that popped up that says France has deployed its Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier to fight against ISIS in Iraq. And so where's it going? It's going just about 200 kilometers off the north coast of Bahrain in the direction of Iraq. Jets sent from the carrier reach Iraq twice as fast as those flying from their base in the United Arab Emirates. And this is what President Hollande told the military personnel back on the carrier. It says that the Charles Hebdo massacre justifies the presence of our aircraft carrier. In other words, he's using the attack. Remember, I said this looked like a false flag incident. This looked like someone had created from the inside in order to push France into war. This is exactly what's happened here. This is what happened in 9/11. How did you push the United States into war? Well, in order to get the United States to say, "Oh yes, let's go to war," there had to be a 9/11. And people say, "Oh no, the United States can't be involved in 9/11, can't be 9/11." And then as I started thinking about it, we started talking about it. This was on Tiny Chat. There was a group of people that I was friends with on Tiny Chat, but I was banned from there, so there goes that. And as we're talking about, they were saying, well, no, the United States can't really be involved in 9/11. This is all conspiracy theory. But as they started talking about it, they started talking about collateral damage, and they started, introducing this whole concept of collateral damage, and how collateral damage, as long as it's low enough, it can be seen as a strategic boom, and this allows a government to move forward with its evil plans of creating war. That you can start believing that, maybe the government was involved in all these different things. The exact details doesn't come out and say, oh yeah, the plans are painted. That doesn't really matter. It's the overall strategic result. I mean, does the attack on a particular point, like here in France, you have the Charles Hebdo, you had 9/11. World War II, you had Pearl Harbor. That brought the United States into World War II more actively. Are these events, were they preventable, or were they genuinely real events that, surprised the United States? But as you look at these things in history, you begin to realize that there were opportunities that, hey, why wasn't this recognized? Because you see that there were trackings, that the jets coming in, the airplanes coming in to bomb Pearl Harbor were seen on radar, and it had been reported. It just was sort of filed away by a bureaucrat and sort of forgotten about until the attack came. And then, of course, historically later on, they found these files tucked away, neatly in some archive, but the files were there. They just were never acted on. So you go, oh well, that was bureaucracy, but. Was it bureaucracy, or was this, okay, let's let the bureaucracy do what it always does, file up? I mean, this is what happened in 9/11. 9/11, the hijackers were all being tracked by the FBI. A few weeks before the attack occurred, the FBI was suddenly called off, and the government lost track of the hijackers. Same thing occurred with the Boston bombings. The Boston bombers, the Boston bombers were known to the FBI a little bit before the bombings occurred. They were lost track of. The bombers were lost track of by the FBI. They kind of disappeared, so-called disappeared, and the Boston bombings happened. So is this, convenient bureaucracy, or is it something more than that? And this is what happens as you start piecing these things together. And these aren't in big magazines; these aren't in big news systems. They're coming from smaller, different sources. And of course, in one of these smaller, different sources, and this is akin to WikiLeaks. Mossad has its own form of WikiLeaks. And what did the Mossad version of WikiLeaks pop up with? It pops up with that the assessment on Iran was completely false by Benjamin Netanyahu. But the thing is, we know Netanyahu's a liar. We see what's happening in Gaza, and we know he's a liar. But no one's willing to call Netanyahu on or his name in Haaretz. His name is Bibi, right? No one's willing to call Bibi on his lies. No one's sitting there and challenging him on these different things. So what happens? He gets away with it. And the thing is, if you look at most of the attacks going on, because everyone says, "Oh yeah," because I see this in the comments. Oh, the Russians, they're so bad, they're so evil. They're attacking, they're supplying arms to Iran, because they're supplying arms to Iran. They're supplying all the evil terrorists with weapons. Well, wait a minute here. Well, let's think about this. Iran is Shia. They're not Sunni. The Sunnis are Arabs. They're the United Arab Emirates. They are the Saudis. That's the Sunnis. ISIS is Sunni. Al-Qaeda is Sunni. Your attackers in Turkey are Sunni. In Albania, in Kosovo, they're Sunni. In Bosnia, they're Sunni. The attacks going on in Thailand are Sunni. In Malaysia, they're Sunni. Same thing with Indonesia, and same thing with Afghanistan. They're all Sunni. Same thing and also in Pakistan. They're all Sunnis. And these are all being supplied with arms, with military weapons by Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. And remember, what did we just hear? The president of Ukraine has struck a deal with the United Arab Emirates to supply them with weapons. Who does the United Arab Emirates get his weapons from? The United States and Israel. So you have a complete section. You have a completion of the puzzle here. We know that the United States is involved. We also know that a lot of people are being fooled by what they see in the media. That they're not being able to put together all these different pieces. And so, all terrorists are Iranian. They're not all Iranian. They're mostly American and Israeli supported. Most of what happened in the Arab Spring, in Egypt, with Muslim Brotherhood, and in Tunisia, in Libya, that's all American. That's all European. That's all NATO. That wasn't Iran. That was NATO. And the thing is, you begin to see here that a condition of habitual lying is the standard for American media, the standard for European media, and it's a standard for politicians. And so you can actually observationally call politicians habitual liars. And this gets into the psychology of evil, because we begin to understand that when you look at the psychology, it'll go back to a psychologist named Ivan Pavlov. He's an 1890s Russian psychologist, looking at the conditioning of dogs and conditioning of animals to do and be trained and to do certain things. Just the way a circus trainer trains an animal to do certain things for different rewards and punishment. An animal does something you want, you reward him. An animal does something bad that you don't want him to do, you punish him. Right? This is known actually as negative and positive reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is when someone does bad, you shock them. When someone does good, you reward them. This is the whole concept of psychological conditioning, where an environment allows you to either condition a person for good or for bad. This was the whole concept of the psychology of torture and pain. And this is what they were looking into in terms of the psychology aspect of this. They were looking at the conditions of torture, the conditions of pain, for the conditions of psychological conditioning. This was MK Ultra. If you look at what's going on in MK Ultra, it was all psychology. It was understanding the human psychology and how do you get a person to do something so horrible, but yet think is absolutely normal. In other words, you're looking at actually creating the psychopath. And I know I talked before about creating the psychopathic society, how the Nazis did that. They created the psychopathic society. And that's what's happening now. Socialism does that. Socialism does that. It breaks down the moral barriers and creates a psychopathic society where the society really doesn't know that what it's doing is wrong, because it's been conditioned to think otherwise. And this is, we say, well, you're getting into Christianity here. You're, what's your belief here? What's your so-called your theological bent, or so on and so forth. There are a lot of different truths. Okay, well, there's a lot of different truths. Let's say before, because people are so opposed to Christianity, they're so opposed to different religious views. Let's take the scientific approach. Let's look at the psychology of things. And we're going to use observational psychology. We're not going to use textbook psychology. We're going to use observational psychology, things that we observe. This is what happens with astronomy. You use observational astronomy. Observational astronomy worked very well, so we can use the techniques from observational astronomy in observational psychology. And the thing is, what we can see here is we see that people now talking about being a good person. And this is in the group that the Tiny Chat group that I was a part of, but I'm no longer part of it. But everything brings its own. It brings its own rewards and its own experience, and these experiences can be good and bad. It really depends on how you take these experiences that really sort of determine whether something is good or bad. And for myself, what ends up happening is that there are people in every group, in every society, who want to be the talkers. They want to be the main authority. And everyone has in a group, in any peer group, there is a main person who controls everything, and then everyone else falls around that person. And when that person's main authority is challenged, but somebody in the group who is supposed to be subordinate, then the person who views himself as the authority figure begins to feel threatened and start knocking the person out. And that's what ends up happening to me, is that I was very different in the group. I didn't necessarily fit in. I was tolerated for a while, but at a certain point I began threatening some of the people who were viewed themselves as being in charge, being in control. They were the main voices there, and one thing led to another, and I ended up being out. They ended up banning me from the group. They, go to log in. Sorry, but you've been banned from the group. So, but then, that's it. That's an experience. That's how the experience works out there. But the thing is a lot of these people talk about being good people. They talk about, well, as long as you're a good person, you don't hurt other people, then I think that's where the whole thing is. And this is the argument here. They're talking about being a good person. But let's look at it in these terms here. Let's look at it about not harming other people. If they say no harm, no foul. But as I said before, if somebody's conditioned to do something, and you participate in that conditioning, in other words, you participate in the negative condition of the person. In other words, they're harming themselves, and you participate in you participate in their self-harm. If someone's cutting their wrists and you encourage them to cut their wrists so that they have cut marks up and down their arms, or you encourage them to commit suicide. You know what, if you die, it's all right. You'll be in peace. Let the person die with dignity. Right? You're the person who encourages suicide. Right? And we know that this exists. We know this is something that is a reality today. We talk about, euthanasia for those who want to die with dignity. Right? This was something straight out of Auschwitz. But this is socialism. This is what socialism has been historically. All you do is look at socialism historically in both in the Soviet Union and in the Nazi concentration camps. This is exactly what we saw. This is history repeating itself. When we come back, we'll continue on with the Eagles of the psychology, and we'll get further into this and see how the psychology of torture and pain leads to the psychology of conditioning, and to a lot of what we're seeing today in terms of the psychology of the psychopathic society. Anyways, when we come back on the other side.
iNN, uncut, unedited, and real. We deal with issues that other networks won't.
Hi, my name is Dr. Daniel Karras. I'm your host for Headlines and Beyond on iNN. If you like the show we're saying, I do not monetize my channel because there's a lot of copyright issues with this. It creates a lot of problems. So how do I make my money? Well, if you like this show, it's very simple. We do it the PBS format. I ask you for a donation, but I'm not going to ask you for a lot. Or, well, all you have to do is, if you have $1 or $2 in your pocket, take it out, put it in an envelope. I'll give you the address. It will be in the description of my channel. Go to the channel description, go to About, and you'll see the address to send the $1 or $2 that you send. All I'm asking for $1 or $2. If you got $1 or $2 in your pocket, stick it in an envelope. Send it to iNN. That's iNN. The address is 87 Telson Road. It's 87 Telson, Telson Road. That's in Markham, Ontario. Postal code is L3R184. And I thank you for your support. Alrighty.
iNN, provoke, inform, and change. We deal with issues that other networks won't.
Welcome back to the other side of our break. We're talking about the psychology of evil. We're talking about how the psychology of pain and torture, that's the whole purpose of MK Ultra, was to understand the psychology of how to condition a person to do something, how to psychologically condition a person to do something completely evil. In other words, remove the conscience. This is the creation of the psychopathic society. And as I said before, you have the, well, as long as I'm a good person. The thing is, if you don't realize, if you've been conditioned to believe that what you're doing is good, even though it may be evil, then you're not going to understand that what you're doing is evil or bad. You're saying, well, I'm a good person. That's not who I am. Or if they do recognize I've done something bad, the other person they wanted me to do this thing. They wanted me to do something bad and evil to them. They were asking for it. It was their own fault. It's not my fault. It's somebody else's fault. And this is what you hear from them. So this will talk more about prostitutes again. This is about sex professionals in Canada. To understand that when someone, some of these girls that say, they'll walk up to someone, in these sort of party situations, they say, "Fuck me." And I'm not going to change the word because this is what it is. There is nothing nice about fucking. It is as the term sounds. There's no love to it. There's no respect to it. The person does not feel good afterwards. And so it does, it continues the conditioning of the slut and the whore. And that's what these terms do. The term slut and whore condition the person to believe that they are worthless, that they deserve what is happening to them, and that they should be happy that they are alive. And that's the main way what happens. The conditioning part, the negative conditioning, the sort of the pain that allows them to do what they do, to sort of, even with a smile, and to ask for it, is they understand that either one, they're going to starve to death, and that's painful, or two, there's somebody beating them up. That if they don't perform with a smile, that at the end of the day, someone's going to beat them up or someone's going to kill them. In other words, there's a life or death situation. There's not a choice there. They become conditioned to their psychology becomes conditioned to that environment of violence, and they absorb it in a manner the way an abused animal absorbs it in a violent environment. They cope with it the best they can. And so when you see somebody smiling, doing something like this and saying, fuck me, they're not saying it because this is what they actually want. This is a condition of the psychology. This is the condition of the psychology. They've become destroyed. And so they don't understand, they no longer understand that what's happening to them is bad, is going to hurt them in the end. They don't see this as bad anymore. And so a person, if you're a person saying, I'm a good person, but you participate in this, well, you know, she's a prostitute, she was asking for it, you know, or she's a slut, she was asking for it. You're participating in that negative conditioning. You're adding to the conditioning. You're adding to the negative experience. You're reinforcing the negative conditioning. You're participating in the evil that was done to the person to make them like that. People don't become sluts and whores but on their own. They're created. And these creations are done by people who are sick and sadistic. They love evil. There are people out there who enjoy the pain of others. All you have to do to understand is look up the term Marquis de Sade. Look at the term sadism. Look at where its origin is from. To understand that these things are part of the upper class society. That there are a lot of rich people, a lot of wealth in society on both moral and immoral sides. Even people who claim to be moral, even bishops, participate in this stuff. And so the thing is if you're participating in this evil by continuing the conditioning of the slut and the whore or the prostitute, then how are you a good person? Ask yourself this question. If you're contributing to somebody cutting their wrist, if you're contributing to somebody abusing themselves, are you really a good person? Do you really consider yourself a good person? And if this is bothering, if you're watching this, hey, wait a minute here, I need to start thinking about this. This is something that sort of, pops into my mind. Hey, then you need to start changing yourself. Well, and the thing is, I need to say, well, in this condition, when I participate in this, well, what am I doing? Am I drunk? Am I high? Are you encouraging somebody else to get drunk, to get high, to get into these conditions? In other words, are you inducing somebody else into your own, evil behavior? If that's the condition, if you find yourself getting high or getting drunk and say, well, this is what I did. And I know one of the people from the group that I talked to was really upset and said, well, I was drunk and I destroyed two people's lives because he ended up fooling around with somebody's girlfriend. And both are drunk at the same time. And the thing is, if you want to consider yourself a good person, you want to sort of change and be that good person, then you have to stop doing that stuff. And it's no longer the excuse, oh, I was drunk or I was high. If that's the case, if you can't control yourself when you're drunk or high, in terms of what your behavior is, then these are the things you need to stop doing in order to become a good person, if that's what you want. If you want to still be an evil person, you want to be like what they call an asshole, then fine, stay doing what you're doing. But you can never say that you're a good person. Maybe you can, but the thing is that you're not going to be. And so the thing, for a lot of guys who are, you're not slaves, you don't have a gun pointed at your head, no one's beating you up to do these things. You have an option. Girls don't necessarily have an option. More often than not, there's a guy in the background, there's somebody in the background beating them up, pushing them into these different positions where they're behaving as sluts and whores. This is not what they would normally be doing. A 7-year-old girl does not grow up to be a slut. There's an inducement there. There is a conditioning of the psychology that produces the slut and the whore, and most of this psychological conditioning that goes on is usually through torture and pain. It's called negative conditioning. You can look at this if you want to go back, and as a reference to this, go look at the experiments of Stanley Milgram. It's listed in the notes here. It's one of the areas that you need to study One of the things you need to look at is the experiments of Stanley Milgram. It's in New York City. You can look it up on YouTube. Look at that. Understand what was going on there, and then you can understand a lot of what's going on here in the psychology of torture. You can also understand that the work of Stanley Milgram was actually part of MK Ultra. That was part of understanding how pain leads to conditioning and how you can use torture to really change the psychological makeup of the person. So in other words, psychological conditioning to create evil, to create a person without a conscience who doesn't understand what's right and wrong. This is how you achieve it through pain, and this is exactly the psychological conditioning of the slut and the whore. There's enough pain, there's enough inducement, negative inducement, so that the slut and the whore says, "Yes, this is what I want. Please fuck me." And as these turn, you see this in these people. They're not going to turn around and say, "Oh, what you're doing to me is bad," because they know if they appear not to like it, if the customer is dissatisfied, then the people who own them will hurt them very badly, or even kill them. This is understood. And so you can't trust that smiling face and say, "Hey, this is what she wants. She was asking for it." And yet, this is exactly, this education can be seen, in the statutes of Mutta. You see this we're going into Islam again. We're going into these sort of righteous people of Islam. Oh no! Well, we believe in marriage. Well, they do have a term of marriage in Mutta. Mutta is marriage, but it's a temporary marriage used for pleasure. And in this whole thing of Mutta, they need to provide girls to Muslim men. Mutta does not apply to women. A Muslim woman cannot have Mutta. They cannot have a rented marriage. They can't have a temporary husband. Only the men can do this. This is only for the men. And the women of Mutta are viewed as slave girls. They're a significant class lower. And so they're not going to do Mutta with a Muslim girl. They're going to do Mutta with a non-Muslim girl. A girl who, and this is what you see, the girls going over to ISIS. Oh, yeah, you're going to go fight for ISIS. You're going to go fight for... No, you're not going to fight for justice. None of these girls are going to be there for justice, to fight against evil tyranny. What are they going to be doing? They're going to be put into the prostitution rings. And this is what happened. One of the girls from I think from Australia, or wherever they were from, ended up being pregnant. Now, how do you, within 6 months of being there, do you end up pregnant? Well, you were raped. You were promised one thing. When you got there, you were raped. But of course, the Muslims won't call that. They call it temporary marriage, and it's all legal within the Islamic texts. You go into the Islamic books, and you'll find it right there. You'll find it, the statutes of Mutta, within the understandings of the Quran. And so it's not something outside of their morality. And we sort of see this again when we talk about about the evil bankers, the IMF and stuff like that. We see political assassination. You see that the head of the IMF, the former head of IMF, was involved in prostitution rings. That there's no way he didn't know that these girls were prostitutes. He also didn't know that he was the argument. Oh, he wasn't involved. He was involved. He was too high up not to be involved. And the thing is that this happens on both sides. It doesn't matter whether the person is religious and moral, or whether religious and not moral. And this is what we see here in Canada. Here in Ontario, the premier stands up and says, "Oh, we're going to teach the girls and the kids about consent." Well, the problem is that if someone is psychologically conditioned to give consent because they're being forced to, in other words, let's talk about the prostitute and the slut. If you're being beaten up, and now you're saying this because you know you're going to be beaten up if you don't, and this becomes part of your psychological condition. In other words, your "please fuck me" is a condition of the torture there. The person is verbally given consent, but the consent is not of free will. It is not a choice for consent. And then what we have to do is we have to talk about the psychology of consent and the conditions of consent. But that's not going to occur in the schools. What's going on in the schools, in the education program, the sex education program for kids, and this is what came out of Sweden and Europe, is pedophilia. It's the conditioning of the child to understand and say that sex is normal, that we are sexual objects. It has nothing to do with protecting the kids against sexual predators. And this is the result we're seeing. We're seeing an increase in the number of sexual predators out there. We're seeing an increase in Europe and the sexually open areas. The number of sexual slaves, the number of people, women being trafficked for sex has gone up. It's at record highs. It's not low. It did not go down with the opening up of with the open sexual. It goes up, not down. We see that with the bringing in of condoms. Oh, if we bring in condoms, that will resolve the problem. You know, we need to teach them. We need to start teaching them from young about condoms. Well, what's happened? What's been the result? Well, the result is, yes, we've had a reduction in pregnancies, but we also have had a markedly increase, a record increase in STDs. So what's happening? Yes, they're using the condoms, but they're actually having more sex. If you understand what's going on here, look at the statistics. The statistics on the condoms from the research papers state that condoms do not prevent STDs. They do not prevent pregnancies. They reduce the risk. That's all they're doing. They're a risk reducer. That's all it is. Increase the amount of sexual contact, and the risk goes back up again. And this is exactly what we see in the statistics. But this has all been completely ignored by the liberals, because of course, liberals, you can argue, like most of the socialists, they have no conscience. They are psychopaths. They are pedophiles, because this is what's within their philosophy, that there is no mind, there is no soul, there is no God, there is no morality. It's do whatever you want. If you can get away with it and it's popular enough, hey, no problem. Murder children, it's a fetus, it's not a child anymore, it's no longer defined as a human being. Yes, we no longer define. There was once upon a time when Jews weren't defined as human beings, and they were put in Auschwitz, but this is different. These are babies. They're not Jewish. And these are your arguments. Anyways, if you do care to change, the only way you start changing and change the world itself for better is to change yourself. Look at what you do. If you like what you're doing, you like the evils that you're doing, you like what you're participating in, that's you. If you don't like this, you want to be that good person, then you need to start changing. And confronting these problems is one way of doing it. Anyways, I will see you in the next edition of iNN's Headlines and Beyond. My name is Dr. Daniel Karras, and I thank you for joining me. All right, see you.
Welcome to the library, and I am the librarian.
I am the professor. And professor of what? Professor of physics.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light?
Free speech rules here at Democratic Earth.